No, he's probably A1ing the show while we're doing this.
And Chad and team, I will be leaving right at the top there within a couple of minutes, so you may not want to put me in the grid until I get back. Thank you.
Hey, folks. It's been a while. This is Mickey doing a mic check. I'm speaking into an AKG 414 that is going into a sound devices 7440 and feeding an Avid Matrix into audio hijack for some delay and out to loopback and into Zoom.
Sound perfect, Mickey.
Thank you, Bill. You are invisible, though.
I am. I'm desperately trying to get prepared for my opening.
I think it's my first time in a panel with you, Mickey. I'm always behind the scenes.
Probably. Yeah, it's been a long while.
That's cool. That's great you're here. And Brian, you as well. You haven't been here in a while. I've never been with you here as well. And you were our quarterback in the coverage for NAB, so it's great that you're here. I'm not too sure you're quarterback or the offensive coordinator, but you were doing a great job.
He was the head coach.
That was Water Boy.
Hey, by the way, as a voice
you're
in
the
the
Ted
sky,
Lasso character.
As the voice in the sky, who's reading today? Do we have any idea? Is it in the... Oh, Alex is. Okay, good. Never mind. I should have just looked up at the slate.
Yeah, look at the slate.
It's a useful thing. Okay. Done is done.
This is that.
Again, I want to thank everybody for putting in questions, and I want to thank the panel for raising your hands on so many of them. That's really helpful as I get going. It's also cool that we already have NAB coverage questions coming in, so thank you for those. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Every day, our first hour is a general discussion of production and IT-related topics, and we're here just to basically answer your submitted questions in that first hour. Our second hour is typically a deeper dive into a topic, and today we are really excited because we're doing a retrospective of our NAB coverage, and we are incredibly lucky to have some members of the crew from that production here, including the man who was in charge of everything, Brian Shand, who wasn't able to join us for the early retrospective show when we kind of broke it down just a few days or maybe a week or so after the actual coverage. But there were so many things we learned and so many of the people who were involved in this. We just want to talk about it, give them credit, and kind of go back over what worked and what didn't, because we did a lot of things we weren't used to doing here on the show for our live NAB coverage. All of that said, let's see what our viewers and or producers are interested in today. And it looks like Alex isn't in the panel right now. So I'm going to start off by reading my own first question here. Or it's not mine, but the first question today, which comes from, oh, wait, I had it in the wrong mode. From John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. And he says, my execs are woeful on Zoom and they're not technical. I will never get to office hours standards, but how about an Insta360 link, a Shure MV7 mic, and an arm and a pair of Linsol in-ear monitors? Attach it all to a hub, one USB cable to the computer, and done. Jeffrey Powers, do you think that will work?
It will work. I would probably not do the Insta360 link. I would probably just do a Brio. And the reason why is because it's, that PTZ camera, even though you can hand move the PTZ camera, a lot of people will probably not want to do that. I would probably just throw the Brio on there and it will look very stationary. Unless they ask for a 360 link, then you can show them how to do it. But if they don't want to touch anything, then this is just going to be something they'll need to touch from time to time.
Cool. And Jeffrey's going to take over the readership in just a second. Mickey Makachor, what say you?
Yeah, just one thing that that camera and also microphone would be certainly a good solution. Though in terms of the hub, I would definitely go with a Thunderbolt hub, not a USB hub. Devices that need to be able to deliver audio and video in real time need a pathway that does not that is not impeded in terms of both bandwidth and also latency. And a USB hubs typically have that latency. So I'd go Thunderbolt if you would run things through a hub.
Excellent. Jeffrey, what's our next question?
So, oh, wow. Okay. So Donna Eisenberg from Dharamsala, India goes, we have a Sony FX3 with Sony FE, it's a number there, lens. When using clear zoom, we see a small but perceptible decrease in focus sharpness that becomes more pronounced when encoding to a smaller H.264 file. Is this to be expected?
I don't know. We had, and I'm trying to remember who it was that came on and talked us through the Sony stuff. He's here occasionally. And when we saw the new FX3 and he walked us through it, he was noting that clear zoom is a technology that pops up from the sensor a larger output. Now, I don't recall seeing any kind of fuzziness on his side when he did that in our demos. I have known a lot of occurrences where somebody has popped up the raster of a picture and it does get noticeably fuzzy, but I don't remember seeing that on his. If you're seeing that small but perceptible decrease in focus sharpness, I'm wondering if it's built in and that's always going to happen, or if maybe there is some pathway that is taking less than the full sensor data as your native signal. And then if it's doing that, if it's dumbing down the signal before it gets to where you're trying to zoom into it, you're going to get less sharpness. That's just the way things work. If it's taking the whole sensor signal, you shouldn't really have to deal with that unless you get into really extreme zooms. That's been always my experience. Ronnie, you had some thoughts about this?
Well, I would check if there are some stabilizing going on. We've seen this on the A7S3s when we have stabilizer active.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah, because that's trying to take a shaky thing and make it less shaky, so a little bit of loss of resolution wouldn't surprise me. Oh, Alex, you've made it. Are you okay? Is everything set?
Yeah, new bug that we found. So I couldn't. I was already in the space, and then I went to slides, and I went to my slide, but not. I didn't change any state. And when I came back, it was stuck in that state, and then I couldn't turn the camera back on. So I restarted my switcher, which I shouldn't have to do, and then I couldn't turn the video on. So I just kept on restarting the switcher, and then finally dropped back to a breakout room, and then had to actually. I was in a state in Zoom where no one could see me. Like it was so there was a
interesting
deep bug. So sorry for being gone, but it was, so we'll have to we'll take a look at this, because I literally was a kind of a ghost, like JJ couldn't see me. So I had to leave the whole meeting and then come back in and then recheck things. So anyway, sorry for.
Just in case you still think we're just a show, we're also a test bed, and we're trying new things.
We sure did.
Alex is
there. I don't know exactly what we were testing there, but none of it was good.
There you go.
All right. Ready for the next question?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Next question is from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And TJ asks, I noticed that the presenters at Google I/O had a double lavalier mics side by side. In a setup like this, is each one connected to a separate radio pack?
Mickey, help us out.
Two transmitters, and that is a pretty standard practice for double miking.
Absolutely. Javier?
Yeah, what Mickey said is like very common to have as a redundancy in those microphones in case something goes wrong. You have to have two transmitters, because if you put the two mics in the same transmitter, you would be defeating the purpose of having a redundancy. And you have to coordinate the frequencies so those transmitters won't intermodulate each other.
Alex?
Yeah, and there's actually mounts for that to make sure that they mount together so that they're pretty much exactly the same. One of the two things that we see is that they're on different frequencies, obviously, pretty far apart, so they don't get stomped on. And the other thing that we find is that a lot of times, like with some of them that are using the micro dot, we end up, something can get dislodged. And so one starts to get a little staticky because it's not quite on there. And so, yeah, the whole architecture wants to be completely separate if you can.
I remember the first time I bought a Sony ECM77, which is their little tiny mic. I opened the box, and the first thing I saw was the double mount. And I went, oh, they're making me buy a second one? And then I investigated, and that's exactly why. They, in a real mission critical thing, you never want one point of failure if you can possibly avoid it. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And he said, what are the most useful apps for automation on the Mac, PC, Android, and iOS?
Alex, what are your useful ones?
The ones that I use are generally all built into the OS. I have a tendency not to add any automation to the systems outside of that, because I use so many different computers. So the real danger of using automation oftentimes at an OS level is that you end up, so Shortcuts is the one on the Mac that I use a lot. But I really, Shortcuts are the only one that I use. And it's because I don't want to be connected to one platform, or not one platform, but one device, because I have so many of them.
That makes sense to me. Jeffrey?
On the reverse side, I use a couple different apps for video production that are automation apps. And one of them is Top Director, which you can get the one that actually is a software switcher. But there's another one that lets you see all your NDI video cameras, which is really nice. The other one, I haven't used it in a little while, but it's a great app, and it's like the Stream Deck. It's called Touch Portal, and it allows you put the software on the computer, and then of course you run the app, and then it connects up to that computer in question, and then you can create as many buttons as you want to do any type of switching.
And for years, I've had Automator on my machines. I'm hoping they never deprecate it, because I've got one function. I have a client who sends me massive PowerPoints, and they're all single file. And there's an Automator script I built years ago to take them and break them out and put them in folders as single files so I can use them in my videos. And I just don't ever want to lose that. So Apple, if you're listening, please never deprecate Automator, even though it's really old and long in the tooth now. Next question.
Next question is from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris asks, on site surveys for another contractor, do you normally just charge your day rate or hourly? I hate doing hourly billing. Seems like those clients always go back and forth on the bill.
Mickey.
This is coming from the perspective of film and TV for location scouts or reccees. we typically do full day rate, because typically after the visiting the locations, we would then immediately jump into a meeting where we would discuss what we saw, which locations are best, what's the pros and cons of each location, and also it eventually goes down to discussing specifics of the script as well.
Jeffrey Powers.
I have 3 rates. I have a half-day rate, I have a full-day rate, and I have a project rate. I don't do hourly because most of the time, all the projects will include hours before, hours after prep, and as Mickey said, trying to figure out what happened and how it can be fixed for the next time. So, and that's basically that's a 4-hour block for a half day, an 8-hour block for a full day. And then, of course, if there's more than 8 hours, we then start thinking about project rates.
Alex.
Yeah, the only time I do a half-day rate is for a reconnaissance is if I can pack other things into it. So there's sometimes I can pack things into a trip, and I don't want to charge the client a full day if I'm going to only be spending a couple hours there, if I'm able to do those other things. But if I'm going down specifically to LA or New York or whatever, obviously I'm charging the days that it takes to do that. So it just depends on where it is and whether it's local or not. But you do want to calculate, as Mickey pointed out, the meetings, the travel, the time there, all those things are things that are part of what it costs to actually do the thing.
And I just have 2 rules. I try never to charge by the hour if I can possibly avoid it, because every moment you're alive, you're losing inventory. That's number 1. And the second thing is that if I'm good and fast, I make less than somebody who's bad and slow. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I agree with everybody that I try to bill in blocks. I try to do project quotes and just make them smart enough so that there's enough pad in there, or if I want to spend a couple hours on something, it doesn't hurt me.
And the only thing I'll say is that, we all have trouble finding clients at times, but just always have in the back of your head, there are clients that will be reasonable. Like if your clients aren't reasonable, you should be trying to figure out how to get rid of them. Like, just to be clear, like you should be working at how do I work them out of the system, not how do I, and some of them are clients that are difficult aren't necessarily a problem. If you figure out how to, be the whisperer for that client, they're very dedicated to you because no one else wants to work with them. And so the clients that are difficult aren't necessarily, they can actually be a really steady income if you can figure it out. But if you can't figure it out and you just can't mesh with them, and especially ones that are really back and forth over every little penny, you should be trying to figure out how to move them out of your pipeline. It doesn't mean you fire them that day, but you should be really looking at marketing and how you talk to other folks and trying to work them out of your system, because there's plenty of people out there that will hire you and are reasonable and just want good work.
Lots of wisdom in that answer. Let's move on to the next question.
Next question is from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And TJ asks, Google I/O was yesterday. The keynote was 2 hours. What do we think of the production? I thought the pace was painfully slow and interrupted by pause for applause breaks. The screen on the stage was pretty cool, though.
John Preto, watch it?
I thought the production was fine. It's a huge improvement over their presentation they did out in New York a couple of months back. And Wall Street likes it because Google's up and Microsoft's down today. So there you go.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, the production was fine. It was 2 hours long, and that was a little bit. They could have shored up a few things. And you noticed when they were many presenters, when they were presenting, you could tell that they were reading from the card, because they would blow by their pauses and their inflections down and things like that. So overall it worked. Apparently there was a couple things trying to distract. There was also a hawk that nested in the amphitheater there, and it was flying around. And a lot of the people in the amphitheater noted that on like Instagram.
Interesting. Alex.
How often you get a hawk in your keynote? That's all I can say. So I think that, the hard part that Google has beyond just the keynote itself is that they've canceled so many projects so often that it's hard to get excited about a lot of those announcements because you're just not sure. You're like, well, we'll see. and see how it goes. And that's the big challenge that Google has on a regular basis is just following through, with what they're announcing. I think that it looked pretty good. The colors are not something that I would normally use in a keynote. I think that, I tend not to put warm colors behind people. I find that tends to be hard. But overall, I think it was a reasonable production. That venue is very hard to do production in because it's outdoors and it's a really difficult location. So it's always a challenge.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from James Babbitt in San Diego, and James asks, "What methods do the panelists recommend to remove unwanted items from a photo in the iPhone photo library?"
Javier.
To get rid from stuff in the background or like brands or like little things that you're gonna take out, I use this software called Photometer. It was the one that it was called Pixelmator Photo, and it's iOS and it runs in every iOS device. It's like very simple to use. It has like this repair button. You just like draw around, and it's just like a pretty good job. It's like very intuitive, very easy to use. I think it has a free tier with some of the tools. Take a look at it. I think it's like really, really simple to use.
Yeah, I think a lot of those algorithms are now pretty well known and are in a lot of the software where you just run your finger over it and it disappears. So they're doing a lot of work in AI in that area. Alex.
I use Affinity Photo a lot for a lot of things, but I will say that Photoshop is still the standard for removing things. It still has, we would be remiss to not say that Photoshop still has some of the best removal tools that we've seen. Do also look at the backfill tools that are happening with AI. If you start watching those things that are happening right now, people are filling those things in with AI algorithms very effectively. So we expect to see more of that in the future.
Does Adobe still call that content-aware fill? Is that what you're looking for?
There's a lot of different tools. And, that's the whole thing is there's like 8 or 9 tools in there that from cloning to content-aware fill to smart, I think it's like smart brush or something. There's a couple, but there's a lot of different ways to remove those right now.
Excellent. All right. So hopefully, James, we've taken care of you. Let's go on to one more question.
Next question is from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. And Andy asks, what are the best practices for checking network connectivity during site surveys?
Ronnie Hossoy in Tromsø, Norway is here with us today. And Ronnie, can you help us?
Well, it depends, like Mickey says. If we're going to stream, let's say full HD, 50 frames, we tend to bring our laptops or routers to measure the bandwidth directly on the cable. The important thing here is to bring the router that you're actually going to use, because there could be limitations on what's called netting. Some of the venues doesn't allow for our router to be connected, so that is definitely a thing to check.
Excellent. Jeffrey.
Getting a network checker like a Fluke. There's a couple different devices that you can bring in that you would then test. You can test the ports, you can test the connection to the server, you can test the connection outside, and a lot more. I would bring another router in, and because most of the time when we go into an office to do live streaming, we're using our own router that's going into their network and then going out. So I make sure that you are not going to get stopped by their IT as you're going, because of course some IT shops have their networks tied down, and they notice instantly once an errant device shows up. So working close with them is always a good thing to do. But you definitely test every single plug, because we had one time where it was just there were 2 plugs in the thing, and the one wasn't working, and we were able to diagnose it, switch it to the other one, and get our live stream going.
Did you say the network tool is called a Fluke? As in, how did you find the problem? It was a Fluke.
Fluke is one of them. There's other brands, but Fluke is a major brand that allows you to do a lot of testing. Yeah,
Alex.
Yeah, there are link runners are something that you can plug in, and link scouts are things, and those I think Link Scout is made by Fluke. But these are devices that will tell you everything that's going on. Now, if you're at a secure location, I've done this without thinking about it at a secure location, and people get real excited really quickly because it tells you every device that you're going through on the way out of the building. And so so be careful of where you use those. The other thing that we do is a trace route. So we want to see how many places that it hops and how long it takes to get through those. We hit one building one time where we had 100 hops before we got out of the building, and so then we know that we're going to have to do something. So trace route is a really useful tool. It's a command line that you can do that's going to tell you what you're, give you a sense of what you're going through to get out of the building. Oftentimes we don't have a lot of the equipment that we are going to have at the event because it's coming in a rack and it's a bunch of different things there. But we do, the other thing we tend to note is what are the Ethernet, what are the ports that we're going to use if they're there. And it depends on the size of the building or the size. Like if we're going to a conference center, we don't know what's going to happen there because people are going to bring something. If you're working in a really large company, usually there's weeks of meetings working with their IT to open up certain things, and we're not going to have those all until we get there. But at a smaller location, we want to know we want to know where the router is. Where does the WAN enter the building? So if we're going at a bar or a smaller location, we want to know where that is. What does it go through to get to us? And usually our first request is, can we put a router between the WAN and their LAN? So if they're big, then we're going to have lots of meetings with their IT team, and they're going to tell us how they're going to do it, and they're going to open the ports that we asked for, and that's going to be all processed. If they don't have an IT team, we usually are going to ask, can we put the router between the WAN and their equipment? And then what we do is we slice off a VLAN to supply them with what they need, and then we keep the rest. And so we don't want to work with their router, their WAN connection if we don't have to. So those are usually the things that we kind of take into account there.
So, no surprise to me, this is an excellent panel, and we're cutting through questions really quickly. So if you have any additional questions, great time to put them in. Great day. We will have some capacity here. And as always, if you haven't voted and gone through the list, looked at the questions and voted up or down the ones that you want us to spend the most time on, please do so, because that really helps us talk most about what you as a group want to talk about. That's our whole goal here. And don't forget those second hour questions as well. We're really looking forward to talking to the team that was responsible for all our NAB coverage this year. All right, next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. And Douglas asks, with 2 wireless transmitters per presenter, wouldn't it be a lot harder to find enough clear air in the crowded event space?
Mickey, what do you think?
Yeah, it really depends on how crowded the RF environment is and how many RF channels you need. As always with any use of RF channels or wireless microphones, do your homework. Do your scans, scan the frequencies. If you need a lot of RF, perhaps try to bring in systems that are spread across the spectrum that is available for you to use, or bring wideband systems such as Wisicom. And as Javier mentioned earlier, coordinate your frequencies and calculate for intermodulation.
Javier, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and if you can, I don't think two mics is gonna be that big of a toll. I think if you can find the space for like a 70-piece orchestra, you can find place for 2 microphones. And remember, the transmitter has to be near the mic because you have to connect it. But the receiver, you can put it whenever you want. So you can put it close to the stage. That way you don't have to run like a lot of antennas or anything. You can put it as close as you can and then run Dante or any other protocol and then take it out. So if you do those things well, like what Mickey said, coordinate the frequencies, get everything right, get a good wireless system, you can throw not 2, you can have 50 mics and work. So
a lot of wisdom there. Let's move on to the next question.
Next question is from Laura Thompson in Beaumont, Texas. And Laura asks, is there a replacement micro USB cable for the Bigfoot microphone?
Mickey, start us off.
Yeah, just took a look at the Bigfoot, and it uses a mini USB cable. It has a mini USB connector on it, not a micro. And you should be able to find those cables fairly easily on places like Amazon.
Harshit?
Same advice. The Samsung Q2U has a mini as well to USB-A. So any of those cables will do. CableWorks is a good company, or Cable Matters on Amazon. So they would probably have a good replacement for you there.
Excellent. Jeffrey, anything to add?
Yeah, just make sure that you're getting a cable that'll do data pass through and not just power, because there are some mini cables out there, of course, that'll do just power only.
Alex, you had an add-on?
all I was going to say is it is getting harder. I mean, Monoprice is also a good place to look for these. It is getting harder to find the mini USB cables. I think I might have a whole box of them though. So you should probably ping me. I'll throw one in USPS and send it to you. We had so many of these, and we actually, I think what brought USB-C forward pretty quickly was that the minis, when we moved from micro or mini to micro, the micros were so much less reliable than the minis that a lot of us were really frustrated about the micros. Like they're tiny and they're fiddly and they don't really give us a lot of extra things. And we really, I think it helped us push us to USB-C faster because micros were kind of a disaster.
Mezzanine technology did not make you happy.
Yeah.
Let's move to the next question.
Next question is from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Spin Launch wants to use a rotating arm to sling satellites to space using no rocket fuel. Their website is novel too because it's almost all video and few words. Preto's thoughts? A modern trebuchet?
Here you go with space trebuchet. That sounds great. John Preto, is that what we're going to do for the next Office Hours launch?
Modern trebuchet. That's funny. This company's been around for a couple years now. They're well funded, and they've got funds from NASA to do tests. So I love the idea. I think it's great. Make it happen.
Alex.
And John can let me know if this is the case, but I feel like that when I look at that, I think that while the G's are a lot to launch something, it seems like the G's would be even worse to sling something. Like the amount of G's that you'd have to generate seems like it would damage a lot of equipment. Like a trebuchet works because you're just throwing something at something else. But I don't know if I want to put electron. I've built a couple trebuchets, and I just don't know if I'd want to put a bunch of electronics into a trebuchet. That's all I'm saying. I know it's a modern trebuchet, but still, it's a lot of slinging.
Heard version 2 is a really big slingshot, so we'll see how that works out. Let's go on to the next one.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and he says, what's keeping apps like Siri, Alexa, and Google Home from rolling out AI?
Jeffrey Powers.
Well, first of all, some of these actually do have AI. I mean, you're asking certain questions like, tell me a joke, and the AI bot will come in and go from there. For the most part, I don't want a personal assistant, and if I ask it a question, to come back with something that is AI generated, because I need to know facts if I'm asking a question like that. There's a lot of times where I'm using ChatGPT and I say, hey, look up this product, maybe give me a quick 250 word on this. And then they start looking at it and they start telling me the wrong product or the incorrect information on the product. I don't want that to come from a personal assistant just yet, or ever for that matter. But I think that's the biggest hang up right now is we just want to know when we ask a question, what it is, like an actor's name or what the temperature is and things like that. And then, of course, some of that's already AI generated.
Javier.
I also think it's a PR caution because people are still getting used to having a device that's always listening to you, quote unquote. And then having them in your home was a big step for a lot of people. And now AI is this other technology that a lot of people are getting scared about. And it's like, it's going to take our job. It's going to change everything. So if you put those together into your home, a lot of people is going to like Skynet, like go there like super quickly. So I think that most companies are like treading very carefully in that environment because it can be a PR mess like super quickly.
John Preto.
Javier's right on the money. That's exactly what happened. And what's interesting, yesterday, Google mentioned over and over, we've been in this AI business for 10 years. And Google was trying to be very careful on the release of their AI, specifically for the social repercussions therein. And so that's what we're seeing now. They were forced to make these motions forward because of OpenAI and the relationship with Microsoft. And so now they're all rushing to get stuff out the door. But that's exactly the reason why.
Yeah, this looks like it's a societal change on a pretty large level with all these new tools. So it'll be interesting to see how it rolls out. We will be talking about it here on Office Hours, I'm sure, most of the days from now until we stop doing this, probably. Next question.
Next question is from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. And Mitchell asks, if Avid, Final Cut, Premiere, and Resolve were placed in a death match, which one would survive?
Ooh, death matches. Javier's going to start us off. Javier?
I'm sure someone else is gonna take the better features, better workflow, whatever approach. For me, it's very interesting because those are four companies like doing very different things. Like Avid is like a hardware/software company that is like the standard, like for TV. Pro Tools is for mixing, for audio mixing, etc. So they have like this big muscle supporting them. Final Cut, I mean, Apple can run Final Cut for 200 years without making 1 cent of it, and it wouldn't matter to them. They have so much money. And if they start closing, like doing distribution and doing other things, Apple has, they can go like forever with that product. Blackmagic with Resolve, they even do a free tier that a lot of people use because they sell a lot of hardware and it's all about the ecosystem. And they have like this super robust software that does a lot of things with their cameras and their switchers. And I think it's like a different thing. And Premiere, it's the software, and Adobe has more of services and software. So like for as companies, I think there are 4 different approaches, and I don't think any of those 4 is gonna go anywhere. I think it gets to different people. The pricing strategy is super different, and I think it's more like I don't think there's room for more, or even unless they are like very creative solutions, because those 4 are like there to stay.
Nice analysis, Ronnie. Your thoughts?
Well, we use 3 of them in our agency. We use mostly DaVinci Resolve nowadays. And that's basically because of the workflow with multiple editors working at the same project at the same time. We are still using Premiere for the cool things where we also have After Effects. And me, myself, is using a lot of Apple editing. So I'm tend to use that as well. So Final Cut has been really, really quick for us, and DaVinci is taking more and more focus. And as I've heard, rumors says that the Norwegian broadcaster NRK are silently moving over to DaVinci Resolve as well.
Interesting. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Avid is pretty embedded into the Hollywood market. I mean, it's pretty much that's what everyone's using, and I don't see that probably moving until the market disappears. Which it may, but it's probably another couple decades of steady work for Avid. No growth, I don't think. I don't think that anyone's using it much outside of that, other than the schools that teach it. We never see it in the wild outside of Hollywood and New York, and so that it kind of lives in that environment. I think that Final Cut now, with the move to the iPad, and you're probably going to see a pretty aggressive move in social / education markets, may really take up a lot of ground because it's a lot simpler than Resolve. It's just easier to use than Resolve and much faster if you're putting together things for social media or for those types of things. I know that Resolve is making some moves towards social media, but I think for a lot of creators, it'll be a little heavy to do that. The one that I don't really understand right now, like what their trajectory is, and I think that Adobe has a lot of things going for it, but After Effects. But I think Premiere is kind of the odd app out in the sense that it doesn't, Resolve is moving much faster, and is got a lot more in it, and it's a lot less expensive. And so it's moving, and we see the biggest growth right now is in Resolve. Across, in professional areas. So it'll be interesting. I don't think that it's easy to pick one. I think that from a pure feature set, Resolve is probably the most feature heavy app, and they have the most developers, most engineers working on it by a long shot. So I think that it has an advantage in that area. I think that we're probably going to see some very aggressive moves by Blackmagic when it comes to Resolve and AI. So I would be surprised if we don't see a lot of that. It's the kind of thing that I think that Grant would be excited about. So I think that we're going to probably see some really interesting things coming very soon.
Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Next question is from Brody Hefner in New York City. And Brody asks, this new automated transcription service, Rough Cut Video Editor aimed at YouTubers, has an odd pricing model, $5 per video. But is this a glimpse of the future of AI-enhanced production assistance? Gling.ai.
John, start us off.
Yeah, Jeffrey found this one and we played around with it a little bit. I think $5 per video is ridiculous. You're going to see these features end up in all the other leaders in this business. So a lot of these little guys that are creating these tools will all go away.
And Jeffrey, I see the note here that you have something that you can set off and show it off. This gling thing.
Yeah. So basically, I downloaded it and installed it and played around with it. This is a video that I've been working on. I actually put together yesterday, where I'm showing a pressure washer that I'm going to be reviewing in my show. It does a decent job. You can easily cut out, like for instance, at the beginning here, this is my countdown right here, so I can just cut this whole thing out easy like that, and then I can show all my cuts. So if I want to bring something back in, and then of course export that to whatever software I'm going to use for that. So it does a great job with that. It does put software onto the computer. It's not doing anything in the cloud. So, and of course you can do it on a Mac, you can do it on PC. $5. So basically you're getting $5 for an add-on plugin for doing this. And as John said, this is stuff that Premiere, that DaVinci, and Final Cut are all working to get put into their software already. Unless this company has something that they have a patent on, and then they can end up selling to one of these or licensing to these companies, then yeah, it'll probably go away really quick.
Is this like pay per use? Well, not actually pay per use, but pay per output. Is that why they charge you? Is each video you output? It was that's an interesting pricing
so
model.
You can.
I haven't seen that before.
I haven't done more than one, but I have a feeling you could actually edit all day all your videos. But if you tried to export it to Adobe or to Final Cut, it'll then say, "Hey, we're going to charge you for that."
Interesting, Alex.
Yeah, I think that this is the primary competitor here is Descript, who we had on a couple of weeks ago as far as doing a lot of the edits. A lot of the edits are very similar to that. Descript is a little bit more expensive up front, but obviously less expensive as you get going. So I think that, but I do think that many of the features will end up in the big editing apps. So we've already seen Resolve and Premiere really take push that forward pretty quickly. But I do think that there is a market for people just being able to just hack something out. They did a recording, they did something, they don't want to learn Final Cut or Resolve or Logic or something else. They just want to learn, they just want to, clip it out. I think the real challenge for that will be, when someone doesn't have that technical skill, are they doing anything around it that makes it technically listenable or viewable? And I think that's the hard part. The inflation rate on content right now is pretty intense. I would call it nearly hyperinflation, which means that the value of the content itself is dropping like a rock because a lot of these tools are out there and people are just pumping out massive amounts of content that are reasonably good. And I think the real challenge is are people going to keep buying it, or have time to watch it? So it's we're kind of in a hyperinflation moment, and I think these are accelerating that. So it's which is fine. It just means we have to keep as content creators, we have to keep thinking about where we fit into that model.
John or Alex or anybody else who knows, because I don't, it is the neural engine that they keep talking about in Apple. Are there equivalent things on the other platforms that can help them, I guess, integrate AI kinds of operations in their things, or do they do them on the general processors? And is there any difference to that?
GPUs, they're done on NVIDIA cards.
Yeah. So they don't have a separate
massive. They have like $30,000-$40,000 NVIDIA cards that really are. This is all they're designed to do. So there's definitely, but in a general PC, they don't have this. Most of them don't have the same machine learning or neural engines that the M1 have. But NVIDIA provides the real hardware, and that's why a lot of this makes more sense in the cloud. Is because they have these, they're getting these huge NVIDIA cards that are supporting all of those things in the cloud that an individual can't afford.
Okay. So if you're using that kind of cloud workflow,
when you go to ChatGPT, you're talking to an NVIDIA card.
There you go. Thank you. That really helps me understand the architecture of this. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, Sony has launched a camera with retinal projection technology to enable visually impaired people to take quality pictures. Would this be a game changer for them in our industry?
Harshid's going to weigh in on this. Harshid?
Yes, this will be a game changer in a couple different ways. This is basically a monocular that is digitized. The product that is in question is called the Sony HX99 RNV kit. They have kind of paid the exporting fee, if you may, for the cost. So the cost has become lower for the visually impaired. And due to that, the device is basically supposed to work as it projects whatever image it sees as a laser image onto your retina, so it gives you better imagery. So for those that have macular degeneration at a lower, not a high stage in it, a high phase or stage in it, they could probably utilize something like this. Sony is also working on screen readers. So to add a screen reader onto a camera to, let's say, get autofocus and get all your shots in that specific numeric value, and then get it ready, and then autofocus is already doing its thing and you just snap a shot, it's going to change that perspective. And for those that have some vision, or perhaps just want to use something like a zoom in optical thing to look at a screen from far away, this would be a good tool. So it's not only for the blind and visually impaired, this could be for anyone. And I hear that San Diego Sony, the shop over there, is where you could find some of these devices to test them out. So if you're in that area, go check it out.
Oh, holy heck, that's like 2 blocks from me, the big Sony tower here in San Diego. So that's cool. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. By the way, if you haven't got a question in there and you have one that you've been percolating on, this is a perfect day to do it. We have about another 20 minutes to go, and we've got some room in the queue. Also, remember, please take the questions that are there, and if you have a moment, look at and vote them up and give us the idea of what you want to talk about more. I'm looking forward to the top of the hour when we're going to transition everything into talking about our NAB coverage, but for right now, we've got some capacity, so fill it if you'd like. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, one of the drivers for drop kits, according to a production company's marketing, is often subpar internet connections in U.S. homes. The U.S. successfully deployed rural electrification in the 1930s. What will it take to deploy FTTP the same way?
Jeffrey Powers, start us off.
Well, in 1930s, the landscape was a lot different than it is nowadays, because, you had very concentrated cities, but then a lot of rural areas. And for the fiber, to come out, and especially something that gives you great upload and download speed, is actually not too far away. In fact, like for instance, in my neighborhood, they started putting in fiber last year. It would have started last year if it wasn't for the city causing an uproar on getting all the permits and everything like that to do that. So they're finishing it up, and I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks that I'm going to have a fiber connection. I have 2 internet connections coming in here because I need that failover if anything happens to the first one, because a lot of times fiber does get cut. That's the main problem with a lot of outages, is somebody digs into the ground and cuts the fiber. So I want to be able to have that with that. But I think within the next 5 years, all the major cities will have fiber. Getting out to rural, if it depends on where you are. And if you are really out there, you're probably going to have to dig into your pocketbook to get a fiber line sent out to you.
Alex?
I'm not going to get into politics, but it's political. the reason that we haven't done what's necessary to make that happen is because the telecommunications companies give our representatives an enormous amount of money to make sure that they don't ask for this. They want to make money, we did it with plumbing, with electricity, with telephones. We could roll glass to the house and make it a utility, which is what at this point, it would make more of a difference in the rural areas, especially, but smaller towns and everything else, than almost anything else that they could do for, building up, giving people new places to live. Like a lot of times people, especially post-COVID, there's a lot of people that would love to move out of the cities and go somewhere else and work remotely. And one of the number one limiting factors for that is their bandwidth. And so I think municipalities should be really pushing for all of this stuff. But I think that it really has to come at some point from a national and state level of we're just going to push this out to everyone because it would make a big difference. But the problem is that, again, there's not the political will to do what we did in the past. The companies affected were not as entrenched as they are now. And that's what slows us down.
I'm sorry. The next question, please.
Next question is from Mike Potter in in Hanover, Germany. What do you think? What do you think on Condor Blue's new camera handle that has a built-in compartment for the SanDisk NVMe SSD connecting via USB-C to a cam or to a recording cam monitor? Ninja 5 Blackmagic Video Assist.
So I looked this thing up, and it's pretty interesting. It's basically just the type of handle that you bolt onto a cage rig in order to either carry your camera around between locations or sometimes to actually operate it in low angle mode. And then inside of that, they built a place to put an NVMe card for additional storage. It serves the same function that Alex and I and many others use by putting a little card holder or a small, like the little SanDisk holders on the top of our camera and running a cable to the output. So we have much more capacity than the simple little cards used in our cameras. Looks like an interesting form factor. It's out of the way. I will say I bolt a camera onto my rig maybe 20% or 30% of the time, often because I have some kind of monitor or something else on top of the cage, like a viewfinder hookup or something, a viewfinder shade hookup for outdoor shooting. So I'd use it occasionally, but it looks interesting. Alex, your thoughts?
I mean, overall, I have to remember, I keep remembering that Condor Blue has really come up from nowhere. I mean, like for me, they just came out of nowhere. They've probably been around for years, and there's probably people in this panel, like, of course, we use them all the time. But it was kind of a blind spot until a couple of years ago when I bought, I think, a HDMI cable. But they're building a lot of great rigs. I will say the only thing that a lot of us will have trouble with is that a lot of us have had trouble with SanDisk as a recording medium. And so that has been, when, I have some that I've used and I've still had issues with them. I don't know if they picked the right horse in that area, if it's really dedicated to that one. But that'd be the only issue, is that a lot of us have had failed records related to SanDisk, and it's just the way that they set up the memory architecture.
There you go. Let's move to the next question.
Next question is from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia. And Alex asks, he said, I was watching a new video Doug Johnson put out on YouTube regarding criticism that 8 inputs are not enough for even basic production setups. Even in my multicam podcast production, I'm finding 8 inputs on my ATEM limiting. What do we think?
Jeffrey Powers, what's your idea?
There's a lot of shows that I do that are just 4 inputs. Actually, there are some shows that are just 2 inputs. So if you really want to grow and you want to do multi-angles, you got more than one presenter, you want to show desktops and things like that, then yeah, 8 you start to hit limits when you hit 8. And if you're doing super source, then you're definitely probably going to hit some more limits from there. But for the average person that's usually just got 1 or maybe 2 cameras, I think they're not going to hit any limits at all.
Alex.
Yeah, there's plenty of shows that you can do with 8. Now I will admit that I tend to want to see 20 inputs for everything that I'm doing. So I said that, but I generally have a lot of inputs, a lot of I/O, because I want multiple key fills. I want multiple. I want to be able to put a lot of cameras in, a lot of playbacks. I don't want to try to figure out how that looks. But we've definitely sent out kits that have 8 inputs that have been fine, even 4 inputs. It just depends on the kind of show that you're doing. So I think that Blackmagic is making it available for a certain kind of show. And if you're doing a classroom, a small round table, there's many things where 6 cameras and a key fill, or 6 cameras, a playback, and a graphic, and a lower third, those types of things, or 5 cameras, key fill, playback. All of those combinations would work with 8 inputs. The other thing to look at is whether you then start to, one of the things we do to augment that is put a 20 by 20 router in front of it. So now you have a bunch of inputs, and for different parts of the show, you switch from one to the next. And because both of those are relatively inexpensive, I mean, the big thing with Blackmagic is you're paying so little for what you're getting as far as I/O goes. You can always add more to it to extend it if you need to.
Ronnie, your thoughts?
Well, most of the kits we use and send out for small conferences are normally 4 inputs. What we are hitting the limit on is always outputs. So the small ATEMs with HDMI is just 1 output, and it's a limit. For a little bit bigger conferences and kind of more normal productions, we have at least 3 cameras and probably 2 or maybe 3 PC inputs. So 8 is enough for us in most circumstances.
And Brian Shand.
Yeah, and also consider PTZ cameras that can give you different angles, but with the same input as well. So it's like having multiple cameras.
There you go. All right. Hopefully, Alexander, that gave you some insights into some ways to think about it. Let's move on to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, can you demo and discuss TalkBack on the Android PC versus VoiceOver on iOS Apple?
Alex.
I think that's probably an after-hours kind of discussion. Demoing something that gets posted during this show is probably not something we can get to.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on to the next question.
Next question is from Mitchell Hill, and Mitchell asks, from Wilmington, Delaware, and Mitchell asks, I agree with Bill's comment on Wednesday's show that AI can't fully exploit a text script into a properly formatted final edit. Select takes and visual cues are too complicated for today's technology. What do you think?
Javier is going to start us off. Javier?
I agree completely with you, Bill. I'm sure that we're eventually gonna get there. The last part, right now, it's not there. I think it's the key piece of information. There are things that are easier for computers to recognize, like poor focus or if it's too shaky, like those kind of stuff. I think gonna solve themselves like pretty quickly. And the other part is all this AI. Remember, it is getting trained. So it has to learn from you. So if you can like mark up your script with here, you could insert either B-roll or this other, like you have to maybe format different your scripts, like not only like the text, but maybe your inputs. Like here, I would use like this kind of shot or this kind of shot. And then after, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but then if the final edit tells you like, what kind of job did I do? Did you like my B-roll selection? You don't like my B-roll selection? Am I cutting too fast? Am I cutting too slow? Like it's like having an intern that's gonna learn from you. So I think that watching you edit will make it easier for then you can tell it like, have this like sort of, I prefer this kind of shot, and if it doesn't work, get this kind of shot, and if it doesn't work, get this kind of shot. And after a while, I think you can train it to edit like you. So I think that's good, because like having like an assistant more than having it do the work for you. So I think that's where I see it going. Interesting. Alex?
I don't think it replaces the top 20%, maybe the top 10% of editors, but there's a lot of folks that don't cut a very good show. I'm on the tail end of that a lot. And so we just have to remember that when we talk about, like there's a lot of people here with a lot of experience and say, well, they're not going to replace me. And that may be the case. And that's, it's most likely. But there's a lot of folks that are at average or below average in their ability to, put this together, especially with the kind of content that education and corporate and many other places, there's folks that this isn't their full-time job. I think in that case, in 1 to 2 years, you're going to be able to dump a bunch of stuff into a system, and it will push out something that's probably better than what you have, the people that you have on staff. And that's the danger, is that it's what you can afford to do, and so I think that there are many editors that are going to do just fine. This isn't going to affect at all because they're good at what they do, and they are very good at what they do. But I think that a lot of, again, below average and average editors need to up their skill. And I think that for us, we have to be very conscious of how important what we're doing here in Office Hours is, in the sense that we have to keep growing all the time. It's a lifetime thing now. It is not something that you get good at something and just do it. We have to keep learning faster than the machine. So that's going to take all of us together to do that.
It's interesting. When I read this, I thought to myself, I don't know why, I flashed back to getting instructions on household purchases, like maybe a shed that I was building. And remember those terrible translations that we used to face where you'd almost laugh because the English was fractured and it wasn't done very well. I don't see much of that anymore. Now the industry of instructions for offshore products has gotten so good at this that you usually open an instruction booklet, even for a modestly priced thing, and you found 7 languages and they all sound like they're written well and you can follow it really easily. I consider most of this AI translation stuff like back in that era when I used to get those terrible instructions, and it's going to get better. We know that. I used to say here famously 50%, getting to 50% quality is still easy, and it's never been easier than it is today, and it's harder and harder to push up. I'm constantly revising that, and I'm agreeing with Alex that it's, moving towards 70% is pretty easy with the automation, but then the top end is still pushed. It's really hard to get there, and I think that's going to always be that way. There'll be more capabilities at the lower end, cheaper and more available. But that top really does require, I've got 10 ways I can cut this sequence together. It's not what is the most efficient or what is the shortest. It's what is the most satisfying. And those kind of skills are always going to be, I think, in high demand. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, and to get back to what you're talking about there, I mean, there's going to be a point where you take about 6 cameras and you put together something that you built, that you bought on Amazon, and the thing is just going to analyze the video and then build a description and then do 3D animations of what that looks like. And it's going to do all that for you relatively quickly. And so those are the kind of things that I think are going to happen. And I still feel like there's so much room to grow when I get devices, things that I have to put together. There's a handful of places now that you roll over a QR code and it immediately plays you a video on how to do this. And that's kind of where I think a lot of things go. But what I will say is that there's so much content. When you look at just the how to build stuff and how to put things together, there is so much content in the world that hasn't been produced that's needed, like how to do things, how to move forward. We're still learning at a snail's pace because the content is just too expensive to produce that content. As we work with AI, not have AI take over, but work with AI to magnify a creator's vision, so much more knowledge is going to come out into the world, and we're going to learn faster. You're just going to learn how to do things faster because it's going to be more efficient to do it. But you will have to learn, and you will have to work all the time to stay ahead.
And so I'm going to send out a warning. When I asked for more questions, you guys responded, men and women and people just of all types you filled up the queue. And I don't think we're going to be able to get everything before the top of the hour. So thank you. Don't forget that if we don't get to your question, it'll be sent back. You can hold on to it and please bring it up tomorrow. We've got another show every day. So don't let your questions go to waste once you've formulated them. But for right now, let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, Elementor just announced that they've integrated AI natively into their WordPress editor to instantly generate high-quality content and code. Is this the only website AI creator so far?
John Preto.
Oh, boy, don't get me started with Elementor. It's one of the first WYSIWYGs that started the subscription model for WordPress editing. It drives me crazy. I hate it. And this is totally a gimmick. This is like what Chris has on his screen that says now with AI. That's what this is. So first of all, it's about 10 lines of code to integrate ChatGPT into any of your applications. The problem is GPT-4, the model GPT-4 is super expensive. And most of the integrations that you're seeing and stuff like this, I guarantee you is 3.5 and not 4.0. So you're not getting the latest, greatest stuff. Use all the tools, right, built into the $20 version of OpenAI. Copy that into your WordPress site, and then use Midjourney for your graphics. That's the best way to go.
Ronnie Hofsaway.
Well, quick answer is no. There are even several AI integrations for Elementor, and a host of other is available as well from both the WordPress repository, but also for other CMSs. But I totally agree with Mr. Preto. The prices here is the big question. How is this going to be priced and for whom? We are using this in our digital agency, but it's not good enough yet.
Interesting. So we are almost at the top of the hour now. We're going to turn our attention over to our discussion of
NAB. We can do one more.
Okay, let's do one more question then. Yeah.
Next question is from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia. Is it possible to integrate an ATEM 2ME Constellation into a setup with an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO switcher? Not sure if that's the right way to go, or just to replace the Extreme altogether. Can the Extreme be programmed to control the Constellation?
Mickey, help us out.
I think, if you're talking about, like, say, cascading one switcher's output to another switcher's inputs, I think unless you have a very specific use case that you've decided upon early on, on what goes into where, you may find yourself in a bind because you would say, for example, if you have multiple inputs on switcher number one that is being sent to switcher number two, and you want to build a super source of those inputs on switcher number two, you would have a hard time with that. You'd have to unplug or reroute or repatch things. If you're talking about strictly about controlling, you can build ways to control the 2ME from the Mini via, say, companion with triggers or mix effect with Isadora. Though I would recommend that you lean more towards getting a dedicated controller, like something from Scarhoy, X-Keys, or even a Stream Deck.
Nice. Okay. Boy, I've been so excited for this to come back again. All of you know that we did some significant coverage at NAB this year, and I know that those of you who watched it, I just as a viewer think, wow, they did a really good job. They did a lot of, we were able to agilely move out to the field, have people go to booths, bring a kind of a visit the booth experience to you live. But I don't think everybody who watched the show understands exactly how big, technically proficient, and flat out amazing the pyramid of people and technology behind this effort really was. It was an amazing thing to get the privilege to kind of just watch happen in real time. And for everybody you saw on the screen doing something from the show floor or on the panel or wherever, there were a lot of people working very hard in the back to make this all happen. And under the kind of live deadline pressure that a live show brings, where you can't really make mistakes because everybody is expecting the next piece to show up just like we watch television, and yet in the background there may be 1,000 things going on that people have to fix in real time. This crew did an amazing job of that, and we're very lucky to have many of them here with us today, including the person who produced all of this for us, Brian Shand. And so I'm going to toss it to Brian for a minute, then Alex is going to talk a little bit about his plan for the whole thing. But Brian, tell us how you approach this whole thing.
Look, I think I was just a manager of logistics and someone who was part of a great team. And I think really it was a team effort. And to be able to have another office hours production where we can all come together, especially offering people who might not be working on the daily show, and giving them an opportunity was just fantastic. And look, I mean, we had really some pretty good goals where we wanted to, go from the show floor in HDR 5.1. And I know we'll be talking about that a little bit later, but also to have 2 live panels over sort of 2 days, the after hours and also shorts and the VODs. It was we were aiming pretty high. And I think what these productions do is they give us an opportunity to really go for it. We don't have the same pressure as a paid production, and then we can really just try and see what we can accomplish with a great volunteer group as well.
Alex, you conceived all of this. Tell us what your thinking was originally.
Well, I think that mostly, I don't know if I conceived it, but we're following the path that other people conceived last year. So watching what people were doing, going, hey, we should really do more of this. So I think that, I think as we got to this year, we had so many people coming in, we really wanted to throw a lot of stuff at the wall. Like, let's just see what works, what doesn't work. I think that we found that, VOD is with the limited bandwidth that we had, even with help from Keenan, the limited bandwidth of big files was just hard to move around. So I think that, our cloud idea there, we were like, well, we're going to have like gigabit connections if we're going to actually do that kind of process. So that was something that we learned, or we'll do it more production on site or those types of things to make that actually happen. We did find that the live stuff worked pretty well, so we did, and we had some of the other things that we did. We probably won't talk about quite as much today, but our after hours stuff I thought was a big success. So people being able to sit in after hours and float along. It was the very first try of it where people are able to take, and I think that that may become a big part of what we do is the after hours coverage, where we have people with smaller rigs that are bouncing around and covering things and just showing people what's going on and being able to answer questions. That said, it was really great to have some great setups that we had, and Nikki's going to kind of walk through some of these in a second. But one of the things is we had we had great support from LiveView. LiveView lent us an LU800. Jeff Keithley, 1F Jeff, also lent us another LiveView. So we had two LiveViews that we were able to backhaul back to San Rafael. Lectrosonic gave us a ton of wireless, so we had a bunch of mic plugs and so on and so forth. And that really helped sure things up. I guess it's the wrong word for when I'm talking about Lectrosonic, but anyway, but it helped. The big thing is that by having those LiveViews there, by having the Lectrosonics that were there, it really solved the key pieces of starting to really do coverage from the floor, because a lot of times we were trying to put things together and people are stomping on your wireless, or it's not working all the time, and or the backhaul is it can be here and there, and those two things which we knew we kind of focused on really helped solve a lot of the challenges that we had in the previous ones with things not quite, tying together. And Lectrosonic also supported us and LiveView at IBC. So we knew that those things helped make things a lot better. And being able to use them here, I think it took it to another level. But what I think we ought to do is probably throw this to Mickey and have him just walk through the pipeline, because that's going to generate a bunch of questions. So the reason that we're talking about this, and the reason that we always want to, after these events, is try to talk about how we did things. And we're doing more and more projects as a group. And I think that's a great place. This is because we're not getting paid for it, because we don't have a lot of NDAs. We can share how we do it. We can talk about how we do it. And so we want to make sure that we're re-injecting that knowledge back into the group so that the next event gets better than the last one. So I think what we'll do is, if you see things as Mickey's walking through these, and as we talk about other things here, make sure to throw those questions up. This is your chance to learn a lot from what we worked our way through. So Mickey, go ahead and take over.
Cool. I will cut over to this, and as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to stop for questions or let me know if I'm going too slow, too fast. So this is our pipeline for NAB 2023, going from all the way from the field, going to YouTube. So we start off, we had two field teams, Field Team 1 and Field Team 3. Field Team 2 did not happen because of reasons. We start with the mics. Each team had two Shure SM58s each. Each of these were being fed into Lectrosonics HMA plug-on transmitters, and they were being received on a pair of Lectrosonics LR receivers, two for each field team. The receivers were being fed to two different devices for each field team. Field Team 1 had a Sound Devices MixPre 6.2, and Field Team 3 had the Sony XLR H1, which fed their Sony cameras. And that was being fed to, for Field Team 1, a Blackmagic Design Pocket Cinema camera 6K. Field Team 3, on the other hand, had two different cameras for each day. Day 1 was a Sony A7S III, and Day 2 was a Sony FX30. That was being fed into an HDMI to SDI converter, and then fed into the LU800 encoders. These encoders then transmitted over the public internet to LiveView LU4000 server, and the signal was being sent to an AJA FSHDR. In this case, it's one thing FSHDR number 5.
And one thing I want to kind of go back to with the LiveView is one of the reasons that we really prioritized the LiveView, the LU800, was specifically because for two reasons. One is that we were able to do 10-bit, so that meant that we could do the HDR that we wanted to do for the transmission out. And the second feature is that we could either do 4 1080p streams or 1 4K stream. Now, we didn't do as much 4K as we had planned for a variety of reasons on this one, but we could grab multiple streams. We're going to experiment with both of those as we move forward a little bit more. But those are the two big features that we had some questions about, like, why can't we just use an LU600 or a 300, or why don't we use something else? And it was because we were able to very seamlessly make those changes that we decided to go ahead. I mean, that's why we requested the LU800 for that process. Go ahead.
Want to continue, Mickey, or are you?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, this is the LU800 that Alex was speaking of. So that fed into an LU4000 and then into an FSHDR, in this case FSHDR number 5. The signal was then sent into the ATEM Constellation 8K, which is where Office Hours is cut, along with the panelist inputs from the Zoom ISO machines. Now for audio, let's go back to FSHDR number 5. And then in the FSHDR 5, the audio was being de-embedded and sent out via MADI into an RME DigiFace Dante. It was then sent via the Dante network to a Behringer X32 rack, which is where the program was mixed along with the panelist inputs from the Zoom ISO machines. The final program mix was then sent via Dante to an Audinate AVIO adapter and sent to the Constellation 8K for embedding into the program. And the final program feed was sent to, and this is the usual pipeline that we're using even right now. The feed from the Constellation 8K is being sent to a Terranex AV, where the UHD program is being downscaled to 1080p, then sent to a pair of Elemental Link HD encoders, and sent by the public internet to Media Live, and then from Media Live out to YouTube. So, do you guys want to
just keep going? Yeah, absolutely.
Keep on going. All right. Yeah. So let's talk about. I've received a lot of questions about this. How do the panelists hear the field, and how does the field hear the panelists, and all the IFB feeds that's going on? So let's talk about the interruptible foldback pipeline. So let's go back earlier in the chain to the X32 rack where the program is being created. Aside from the program mix, we are also generating multiple mix minuses. We're creating a mix minus for the field for the panelists on stage. The mix minus consists of all the sources, of course, except their own microphones coming from the Zoom ISO inputs. We're also creating mix minuses for field team 1, 2, and 3. Well, field team 2 did not happen, but we had all those set up and ready to go. These mixes were being sent via Dante to an Apple Mac Mini that's running the Dante Virtual Sound Card and Unity Connect. Unity Connect was used to transmit the mix minuses over the public internet to another Mac Mini at the Cloud Bedrock, which is this is the Unity Intercom server that Jim Hankins has so generously let us use for over a year now for Office Hours. And that is how everyone on comms was assigned the specific mix minus that they should be listening to. And that's how the panelists and the field reporters could hear each other. There was also a request to get a pipeline set up to be able to use live views built-in IFB system. So in this Unity Intercom server, we had to take the PLs, or the PL channels that talents are supposed to hear, and send that out of Unity Intercom into Unity Connect and back into the Mac Mini that is at 3210 at 090. These PLs were then sent to another Behringer X32 rack. We needed another X32 because the first one was out of inputs and outputs. Unless I did a lot of rerouting in between the Daily Show and the NAB broadcast, which I wasn't really keen on doing at 1 a.m. So the mix. So I asked Alex if we could use another X32. He said yes. So use that instead. What was aside from those PL channels being sent to that X32, we also got the mix minuses created on the first X32 rack and also sent that to that second X32 rack. The mix minuses were being ducked down whenever a signal from the appropriate comms PL channels were present. So that was creating foldback mixes that were being interrupted by comms, thus creating an interruptible foldback feed. These feeds were then sent out via Dante to another Audinate AVIO adapter into a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, which was being sent all the way back to the LU4000 server, then back out to the internet, to the LU800s, to their to their IFB outputs. These outputs were not used during the broadcasts, but they were tested, they worked, and if you plugged in an IFB earpiece or a wireless IFB system, you would be able to utilize those feeds. Now, going to the 5.1 surround and the HDR test pipelines. So for the 5.1 and HDR test, only Field Team 1 was part of the test. So let's focus on just Field Team 1. Let's move
And I'm going to set a
Yeah.
little context for this as we kind of talk through it is that, one of the things that we wanted to experiment with was how much does it, how does it feel to see HDR and listen to 5.1? Does it feel more like you're there? And does it, and no one's ever done it before. So we were kind of like we were in a mode of like, let's figure this out. Let's see if the experience is any better. And I think that definitely the resounding, feedback from folks that had a system that were watching it, in a system that could handle it, was that it definitely was a much more immersive experience. They could hear the audience, they could hear the area around them, and really feel like they're there. And Mickey will talk about the technology of it, but I think that we definitely want to keep on experimenting with this because we felt like it was a really successful, it was an idea that a lot of us have had of trying to push that envelope. And it also, we're trying to get to a point where we normalize the idea that we can do HDR and 5.1 or Atmos and Vision or whatever we want to do there. We want to make it so that we just don't think about it. Like, yeah, of course you do that all the time. And not, we don't have to wait. If a client comes to us by doing this and then also by showing all of you how to do it, and then for all of us to do it more together, we get to a point where if a client came to us, there's not like 3 weeks of us trying to figure out how to do it or 3 months of how to figure it out. We're like, oh, yeah, we just do that. Like, yeah, we can just turn that on. And this one was a little bit stressful because we were still figuring out, how to make all the little bits and pieces work. And I think and we couldn't have done it without Mickey's engineering, especially in the 5.1. So it was really good. Anyway, go ahead and take it away, Mickey.
Yeah, just want to add as well, like in the sound world, we talk about not so much as something sound right, but we often speak in terms of like, does this feel right? Because if it doesn't add to the experience, and what's the point? Just because it's cool.
Yeah.
What do you call this? And also in terms of engineering, like I was at the without folks like JJ, Kevin Hansen, and Brian, like, and this wouldn't exist.
Well, and I do want to outline one thing that Nikki just pointed out with the whole team, the team that showed up willing to work on this at NAB, and the team that was and the teams that were offsite willing to work on this at NAB, and the engineering that we had on site, and again, as JJ mentioned, or as Mickey mentioned, JJ and Kevin and Mickey and a lot of folks figuring these things out together. We as a group can do things that no one can do individually. That's the thing that, like we are able to take on these experiments and learn how to do this as a group in a way that if any one of us thought of it, it would take a long time for any one of us to a point where it just doesn't happen, And so a lot of things that we do here at Office Hours are things that happen because there's a bunch of smart folks that are willing to work together on figuring it out. And so I just want to commend everybody that the 5.1 specifically was something that we needed a lot of help from Mickey to figure out. But the general pipeline overall is something, and just the work that it takes. It's not just the engineering; it's people on the ground willing to put the time in. We had an enormous number of people. You'll see a couple of photos from the press area, but we had a huge group of people offline, offsite. Brian was working with all of them, and Dave was working with them as well as a group on site, all putting in incredible hours. Greg came in and just he came in to have a good time, and we just poor Greg was just running everywhere. I think, and Ronnie and his son, and a lot of folks. Edwin and lots of, I can't even list everybody. And of course, we had a great time. I hadn't gotten to host with Javier before, so it was a really good time. So anyway, and Jeffrey was there and Philippe, and so everyone that was putting time in during that made it happen and allowed us to learn what we're learning now and allow us to just do it at all. So it's really, really amazing. Anyway, go ahead, Mickey.
Alrighty. So going back to this, the 5.1 surround and HDR pipeline. So for the 5.1 test and HDR test, only field team 1 was part of that. So let's focus on field team 1. Let's go a little earlier in the chain. A Blackmagic design audio to SDI embedder was placed prior to the LU800. This facilitated embedding up to 8 channels of audio into the SDI feed. For the audio pipeline, let's go back to the Mix Pre 6. This was removed from the chain, and the SM58s and the Lectrosonics Wireless, along with the Sennheiser ambeo microphone, which is an ambisonics microphone, first order ambisonics for 4 channels. That and the Lectrosonics Wireless were fed into a Sound Devices Scorpio mixer and recorder. All 6 microphone feeds were then fed via AES into the audio embedder.
And I just want to say the little bit. There's two things that I just want to say about that as Mickey's working through that is, number one is that one of the reasons that we were looking at the ambisonic and mixing the ambisonic with the mics is that the ambisonic allows us to get the entire environment around us. Whereas the mics can be run right down the center channel. And the advantage of that is that we can attenuate the two. By having mics with a lot of off-axis rejection like the SM58s connected to Lectrosonics, our hosts can do whatever they want. And we can set them in the center channel so that you're always hearing that. But we can create an environment of with the surround. We can create this environment that you feel, but we can still attenuate it. We can say, "Oh, that's getting to be too distracting," so we can bring it down or bring it up. So we had separate control by using this mic system. We had a separate control of what comes down the center channel and is very present. And one thing that we found in surround in general, not just in here, is that when you start to tickle the brain from different directions, it makes what comes down that center channel even more present. And so that's the game that we were playing, is by having, we take the mics. It's not just taking an ambisonic mic and we're just talking and hoping it picks it up. By having 2 mics that were, again, these wireless mics that allowed us to just kind of walk around wherever we wanted, but knowing that we're going to stay in that center channel, but then being able to create that environment was really powerful. The other thing is that there was, I just want to make sure we pass on the learnings so we don't have to do it again. There's I don't know, Mickey, if you talk too much about this, but out of the Scorpio, you have AES out, and you have to set the AES out. The 2 stereo channels. There's 2 right and left. Each will take 2 channels. AES goes 2 channels per XLR channel. So there's 2 channels of AES on left and two on right. And then you need to use the LEMO connector, which I'm having trouble finding. By the way, Mickey will talk. I keep on ordering the wrong 10-pin LEMO for the thing. So, but we're going to build a new cable for this. But basically, the LEMO connector is where you have to get the other 4 channels out. And so we needed to I had to find somebody with one, because trying to order one, they were all back ordered. They're all, what they are. And so that LEMO connector became a thing. And we ended up with this really long cable, because I had to rent it from somebody, an audio sound designer. I just couldn't find them in stock to get them in the time that I needed once I realized that they were there. The other thing that was funny was that the AES, it's not very well documented in the manual how to turn your Scorpio into an AES. And it was really funny because I was sitting there going, I can't figure this out. And I was like, I'm not going to ask Mickey until I've read every manual. I've read everything, and nothing made sense about where this was. And of course, I get on a call with Mickey, and I get like, just go down to the lower right, and click this thing. But it was very much like knock on the side of the wall, knock on the front of the wall, and then turn the door handle kind of way to get in to get the AES out of the Scorpio, which I'm sure a lot of sound field recorders know, but it's not well documented. so anyway,
Mickey, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of capability packed into the field mixers in general, and with such a having a user interface that has to fit in such a tiny screen.
Yeah.
Things have to be tucked away and sub-menus of sub-menus.
Well, that's what I call tucked. It was really tucked away. It was like you had to know it was there. Anyway, the AES let us get that. We were limited to 4K 30 because that's what the Blackmagic one does. We are looking at getting the AJA one for future uses because we want to be able to do 4K 60. But 4K 30 we were capable of doing, even though we didn't do 4K on this round here. Go ahead.
Mickey, do you want to finish up that description? We've got 13 questions in the line.
Okay. Understand. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Cool. Yeah, we're close to the end. Though I just wanted to mention it's not a LEMO connector. It's a Hiroshi 10-pin connector. Hiroshi.
That's why. Also, not well documented. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. Just to continue on. So we had our 2 channels of Lectrosonics Wireless and also the 4 channels from the ambeo microphone being fed into a Scorpio, which pretty much acted as our microphone preamps and also A to D conversion. All 6 feeds were then fed via AES into the audio embedder and sent out down the pipeline all the way down to the to FSHDR6, another FSHDR. More on that later. For the audio, let's go back to FSHDR5. The audio on via FSHDR5 were once again being fed via MADI into an RME DigiFace Dante, then sent via Dante. Sorry, it was coming from FSHDR5 via MADI, and then sent via Dante to another Apple Mac Mini, which is running Dante Virtual Sound Card and Avid's Pro Tools. The Sennheiser ambeo microphone was being decoded into 5.1 in Pro Tools using the HarpX X plugin, and some basic EQ was done with the EQ3 7-band built into Pro Tools. And this is where the full 5.1 program mix was created. The program mix was then sent via Dante back to the RME DigiFace Dante and sent via MADI again to FSHDR6, where it is embedded in with the video feed. The final program feed was then sent to an AWS Elemental Link UHD. This encodes and transmits the feed over the public internet into AWS Media Live. In Media Live, though, something that's different from the regular program that we do daily. In Media Live, the 6 channels of 5.1 was then encoded into EAC3, which is also known as Dolby Digital Plus. This is necessary because YouTube requires EAC3 encoded streams for surround sound. Media Live then transmits the final encoded stream to YouTube. And that is the pipeline.
And I will say that it is it's really, I've done a lot of surround, and the fact that we can do 5.1 and HDR just straight into YouTube without having to think about all the player. There are a ton of problems in the world of the player, how it delivers to the devices, and while it's just getting started, YouTube's doing most of that work, doing that work for us. And so it's really great that even though this looks like a pretty complicated pipeline to put this together, and we want to show everyone as we keep on refining this pipeline over this year, showing everybody how it all gets, how all gets wired together. I think that it's really, it makes it a lot easier not to have to deal with the player. I'm going to show just a couple things, then we'll jump into the questions.
Just wanted to mention that this also makes for a pretty interesting lower Fenwick.
A faux Fenwick. That's a very, very complex faux Fenwick. Yeah, that's perfect. Here's some shots, just a handful of shots that we took from there. So here you can see, this is what really makes the live view work really well is the fact that it's just a backpack and you just have everything kind of wired into it. Here you can see the, if I go to the next, let's see if I can get this to work. Here's you can kind of see where we had this is where we kind of double backed and basically had Here are these are the little receivers that we were using for those mic plugs. And then we had in this bag, we had the Scorpio, which then fed everything in to make that actually work there. Here you can see us trying to find the place that we needed to plug in get the AES out in the Scorpio as we were working through the wiring there. You can see we tested this both low. This is the ambisonic. That's the ambeo mic. This is the connection, and I think I have another one where it's high. This is the connection to it. So it's 4 outputs that are there for those mics that go in raw. We didn't bother to process them on site. We were able to just send them back in the multi-track from the live view back to San Rafael. Now, this is the other experiment. I think this was, Mickey, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think this was the more successful version of this was to move that mic a lot further away to kind of grab things as opposed to having it when it was too low. We had bodies blocking it, and it was getting too much from right where it's at. So I think that probably worked a little bit more effectively. So anyway, let's go ahead and let's jump into those questions. Oh, that's me, isn't it? Mickey, were you gonna add something?
Yeah, in terms of the height of the ambisonics microphone, it really depends on what the goal is. If you're looking for like a general ambience, like the roar of the room, or just the bed, then I would say the higher the better. Because if the microphone is too low, then you risk the chance of possibly getting individual voices pinpointed across your surround plane, as opposed to having it up above. You can just capture a general atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. First question is from Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona. And Tom said, I know we had great success with Lectrosonic Wireless Microphones Office Hours used at NAB. Which models or frequencies did you use to avoid the NAB RF challenges? And would the new Deity Field Wireless system be a contender in this environment?
Mickey, start us out.
So yeah, I'd say like Lectrosonics, their development on their wireless, especially on their receivers, tracking the very, very precise and tight tracking front end filters on their receivers are. I don't think, at least in my experience, anything compares. Like say with the current generation of the 822 receivers. I don't think anything compares to it in the market. Even like the 411A that was released 15 years ago, not many other systems compared to the performance that that receiver gives. Like to the point that say if I'm shooting on location, like I'm not as surprised anymore, even if say I hear transmission or I see transmission on my receivers from hair and makeup that is maybe a block and a half away. It's the performance. There's a reason why they are the industry standard in film and TV, and pretty challenging and used in very challenging environments. I know like Andrew Jones and the rest of the guys at Deity have done a lot to bring like good performance wireless to a much lower price point. But for wireless, you really get what you pay for, and yes, you pay $3,000 for each channel. But if you are doing mission critical work wherein failure is very expensive or unacceptable, you really want to go with the quality wireless.
Ronnie?
Well, being at NAB is surely a nightmare, and not intentionally using the word sure. But as an answer to the question, the L series from Lectrosonics are really good. They use a lot of batteries though, so watch the battery meter all the time and bring extra batteries in your pocket, which we had a situation about. The other question was how did we tune it? We used the Smart Tune, which is actually actively scanning all the frequencies and finding an available one. That worked all the time, and we had no problem whatsoever using that. Just watch the batteries.
Alex?
Yeah, just to underline, I mean, when it needed to work, I mean, we were doing so many things that we're trying to get so many variables to work, as you can see from that layout. What we didn't want to have to think about was the wireless transmission and whether it was going to stick around or break up or do other things like that. And when you put a electrosonic system in, you know that that part's going to go okay. At some point in the future, we want to test some of the sound devices stuff, to see. But from all the stuff that we've actually used, Lectrosonic has been the kind of high watermark for us.
Next question.
Next question is from Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart, Germany. What was the biggest challenge with 5.1 streaming?
Mickey, start us off.
I think, at least from my point of view, the biggest challenge, because 5.1 has been done for decades now. The biggest challenge, I think, earlier on in the process, and Alex was heavily part of this, is figuring out the proper encode into AC3. In terms of this specific project, the biggest challenge was getting time to test.
Yeah. Well, and part of it was pulling everything together, and then all the pieces coming. We were lent a lot of hardware, and all of it showed up right before the show. so we were just landing. We're going to be doing some more testing over the next couple of weeks, from a variety of locations, because we're getting ready for potentially covering Cinegear, and we want to make sure that we take the lessons and figure those things out. But we're kind of working through that right now.
Jeffrey Powers.
So for my 2 minutes of being the ambisonic manager on the crew, I would have to say it's pointing the microphone in the direction to make the 5.1 actually work. As bodies move around, and Alex and I can't think of his name. Sorry.
Javier.
As they were walking around, that if the ambisonic microphone was in the wrong spot, wrong direction, then it kind of threw everybody off. If Javier was on the left side and he was actually on the right side, things like that. But then there was just that small crew that has to work very tight knit to stay in the distances that they need to stay in. And so you've got one person on the camera, you got one person holding the mic, you got this cord that's basically being a tail. And connecting both pieces. So you'd have to be able to move around in tight spots. When we went into the truck to take a look at the mocap stuff, that was a little bit tough, but we didn't spend too much time in there, so that was good. And then bringing everybody back out. So it's just basically managing everything as to where it needs to be, so the 5.1 does not get broken up because one microphone's pointed in the wrong direction.
Javier.
I think one of the most important challenges for an HDR and for the 5.1 was what should we do with it? I mean, with HDR, Alex and I were like, what should we show? Should we go that? Or should we go to the lights? Should we go to the screen? Should we go to the reflections? So that was in 5.1 was the same. We had this from the moment we started, for the next day, or even the next day in Vegas, we were still discussing what should a 5.1 mix of this should look like, or should sound like. If the camera pans, should we drift, or should we try to walk in the straight path so we don't have moving audio, or should we all of that creative decisions? I think is the next part. The technical part, when I got there, it was basically, so the solution was made. I think it's a complex system, but it was built well enough that when we had a hiccup, we could work around it. But the creative part and deciding what to do, not if we could do it, I think that's the next step in making this really into a production.
Found that very fascinating, Javier. Ronnie, your thoughts?
Well, I think the electronics and the system preparations was really good. I think the biggest struggle would be and I just see this as a big problem, we'll probably try this at IBC as well, is the big train of cables and equipment coming through a really packed show floor. and preventing people from stopping you and asking, what is this thing?
Interesting. Alex.
I actually think the big train is good for us. so we definitely leave an impression. While we're talking about 5.1, Mickey, I think you have a Pro Tools session open. Do you want to show a little bit about what that looks like when we do the processing?
Yeah, give me a sec. All right, I'm going to be sharing screen here. Okay. So, all right. So here we have, and just so you guys know, this is an sorry. This isn't the exact Pro Tools session that was used for the broadcast. This is a modified version of it with the recordings, but instead of just being sent out to 5.1, it's actually being sent out to Atmos. And where's my render? So it's being sent out to an Atmos render. Then the Atmos render is taking that Atmos mix and sending that out via binaural. So I would recommend that everyone, the people watching, listen on headphones or earphones so that you can get a better sense of the panning and surround, and also the movement and height, even though you're just listening on stereo. And actually, Bill is putting on his headphones right now, which I should do as well, so that I can hear it properly. Cool. So let me open this back up again. Over here we have Javier's microphone, and then Alex's mic, and this is the 4 channels of raw ambeo recording. So just to show off that the whole effect of panning things around, let me take Alex's mic, and I'll show the Atmos preview here. I'm gonna solo Alex's mic, and then open up the panner.
To see, and one thing that we'll have to
and
wait. Hopefully, Mickey's on comms. Are you on comms
Alex
with Mickey?
Around and
is anyone on comms
in
with
a
Mickey?
circle?
Because what we want to find out is that microphone high enough? Maybe we'll even try making the microphone a little higher and see what we get. But we'll see how that goes. So here we're standing in Central Hall, and so
then
this is
I'll keep Alex down here,
come up this way a little
and
bit.
I'm
We'll
gonna bring him up in terms of height,
so
up to the ceiling.
It's a big place. So we're really excited to see what this all. We're going to go down here and look at a couple things, but we're really excited.
Then
And
back
here
down.
you can kind of see. A lot of times I just go out here and I look. I'm always surprised that more people don't put
I'm
these
not
flags
entirely
up,
sure how well
because
that's coming
that's how I
through
find it.
over
I
a
just
Zoom
gotta look.
feed.
I'm like, I gotta find
But
it.
I'm
There it
gonna
is.
reset
so-
Alex back
so
to
that's,
dead center,
it really
where
makes a difference.
dialogue should be.
It's about
I'm
that.
gonna open up Javier's mic as well.
The holes.
Yeah.
So we've spent 2 hours walking, and you get
So that's just the 2 handheld
yeah,
mics.
no,
the show floor.
absolutely. Yeah, it's and some of the best stuff is found in the
in the back of
the back, the little
Then I'm
booths.
gonna
Yeah, the little
unmute
booths.
the
There's a lot of little booths.
ambisonic.
There's more little booths than there
the
used to be.
ambient.
When I used to come to this hall, it was all just massive booths,
yeah, like
and
huge
so
booths.
it's really gotten a lot more democratic.
I mean, we have the Sennheisers and the DJI.
I'm bringing up
and,
the
big
ambeo a
booths,
bit.
and they have a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of little vendors.
I will say, I think Central Hall is kind of the cool one this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's come down and take a look at some stuff.
And I think that you can hear a lot more of what, for me, you just feel a lot more like you're there, but we're still coming in clear through that center channel.
So and right now I'm just playing the ambeo out here. And during the show, I used the HarpX plugin to do the decoding from the ambeo A format to out to 5.1. Well, now we're decoding it to Atmos. But for today, I'm gonna switch over to using the Rode Sound Field plugin. Just because, and this was showed off by, this plugin was demoed by Jeff Francis last week, I think. I'm using this now simply because it's way more visual than the HarpX plugin. I went with the HarpX for the show because I wanted something that just that I know is simple and will just work, especially because we did not have time for testing. So that's the ambisonics plugin, ambisonics microphone still playing out. And then I'm gonna go over to a portion of the multi-track recording that contains that has wherein they had a PA system playing in the background, and took a screenshot of the video, and it was here behind them. Is my cursor coming? Yeah, my cursor's coming out. Behind them is there was a stage with someone speaking out on PA system. So if we go back to Pro Tools, that is in this area of the recording.
At some point, Edwin's going to look at us and go, "Battery, Aziz, battery." All right. So let's keep on. And no one probably knows that reference. That's a True Lies reference. My favorite.
So you can see there's a lot of energy.
Now
there's a lot of energy in the front left of the recording. You can see that with the brighter colors in this.
This is a very loud
here.
booth. They're doing a live demo, so
there's a lot of loudness behind us. So we're going to see what this picks up, how it works, and
behind them being in the front left from the microphone's
keep on taking
perspective.
those photos, and we're going to hope.
Then later down in the recording,
I'm going to let you run.
I asked them to
Just go ahead and talk.
flip around and have the PA system behind instead, and you would be able to see.
I'm facing right now
You would be able to see more activity
on
on the ambisonics mic in the rear.
So we're looking over at Tilta now.
That way,
There. And here's the
we're
area
trying
where
to
there's
get
more activity in the rear. So I'm going to solo that. Solo the ambisonics. And actually, let me also bring up the level of the surrounds so that it comes across to us more. So that's definitely an advantage with ambisonic capture, is that since you're capturing a sphere of audio, you would be able to in post or later down the line, or even at the live mixing board, you can move things around however it works best for your delivery. If, like, say for example, if the microphone isn't perfectly placed and front isn't front, top isn't perfectly at the top, you can move signals around. And let me find a spot that would be a good example for that. So over here we had the guys speak directly into the ambeo mic, and just to refresh our memory, that would be in the broadcast. This is when they had the mic in frame, and Alex was at the front left of the microphone, Javier towards the rear, and they started speaking into the mic and moving around the mic as they spoke. So let's go back into Pro Tools and play that area back.
Yeah.
Alex is standing to the front left.
And you probably haven't seen this in the shot before, so as we look at this, this is a Sennheiser ambeo, and it's got 4 little mics in there, and then it's got the 4 outputs here. Now, it's not good by itself generally, but what we do is
Alex
take
is at
that
the front
and
left
then convert
there.
it, and we'll talk more about that.
I think I can move it around
I should be
so that
in the back, so anyone that has back speakers, don't get afraid. I'm behind
Javier,
you.
who's actually in the rear, is now sounding like he's in front of
all
us.
the way on the right. So
And I'm going to go.
And then
Hello.
what is switch places?
Harry Potter.
I've come for you.
What's that? Let's
Sorry.
see what that looks like.
Really creepy. So it's a fun experiment.
So just going back to that, though, Alex was making a Chewbacca noise as he was rotating counterclockwise, and you can see that activity.
Really creepy. So it's a fun experiment.
And I think a much clearer example would be I recorded the very quick line check that Javier did right like 15 minutes before the show went live. And this would be even more pronounced in terms of location, because he was speaking at very specific spots during that check.
Okay, I'm standing in the back, Nikki. Here I am at the right of the microphone perspective. Here I'm at the rear right of the microphone mic. Yes. I'm here at the left of the microphone. Okay, front left. Here I'm at front left of the microphone, the same distance.
So I don't know what else to show.
That's
let
good.
Me know if,
That's good.
Very cool.
We got a bunch of, we're stacking up, and I wanted to make sure that we showed people that, because it's really a lot. There's a lot going on there to make all of this work, and it's just the very beginning of what we're working on, and so it's but it's a I wanted to make sure we covered that before we moved on. So let's go ahead to the next question.
Yeah.
Next question is from Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona, and Tom said, "Could you please give us more specifics about each NAB coverage kit?"
Ronnie, start us out.
Well, we were a part of Field Theme 3 and having various talents in front of us. So we had the A7S3 with 2 Lectrosonics going in through the XLR interface. And one of the most important features beside the Lectrosonics was the monopod, which we just got from one of the vendors in the States, which proved to be really, really flexible and made us move very lightly between the big crowds of people. So that was
Do you remember who made that? Is that a Surrey, or is that one of the other brands?
Yeah, that's the Siri, which was kind of launched just a few days before NAB, and it's a really, really good piece of hardware, very light and extremely flexible, and you can mount it in very many different versions to accommodate the needs.
Nice. Brian.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone who did donate equipment or their time as well, because it's really made this production fantastic. So LiveView, Jeff Keithley, Lectrosonics, Jim Hankins, and Keenan the Disaster Group, and really just everyone who was able to contribute.
Alex?
Yeah, and all I was going to say is that I think that we did have tripods and monopods, and I will say that the monopods worked a lot better. The tripods, we probably won't use a tripod again in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I've never used tripods or monopods until the last couple of years, and I found it really liberating.
I mean, when you're moving, when you're moving and trying to get to one thing to after the next, I think it was a little less cumbersome.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Xander Snell in Miami, and Xander asks, why did you use an AVIO to return audio to the mixer when you have an RME DigiFace Dante that can return 32 channels back to the ATEM?
And Mickey.
So yeah, that pipeline was in place way before we had a DigiFace Dante in the pipeline. I think the DigiFace Dante only came in early January, was it, Alex?
Yeah.
While the analog pipeline was in place since for a year, I think.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Jim Wilkins in Marblehead, Massachusetts. With all the audio processing and ambeo decoding plugin, how did you adjust lip sync timing and where in the chain?
Mickey, was that a problem?
Specifically for the 5.1 HDR test, the sync was dialed in at FS-HDR number 6, where the embed was going on. For the regular office hour show, sync is dialed in at the X32.
There you go. Next question.
Next question is from Greg Greckmeyer, and Greg asks, Peter and I spend a lot of time bringing along, after hours along, but my exhibit coverage was rather random and not planned. What would be the goals for the after hours for future coverage?
Alex, you want to address this?
Yeah, one of the things that we're really thinking about as we look into the future is still having it be somewhat random, but have it be something. I don't want to. What we don't want to do, we want to kind of split the difference between what we did at NAB, which is we just kind of roamed around, versus what we've done in the past, which is highly structured. And so I think that what we're looking at is, if we look at a 2-day event, the first day would be after hours, and it's still a lot of people spreading out and just looking at a lot of things. and then you have a more organized process in the second day where we're actually using the live views and interacting with it. But we use the after hours as a way to kind of show everything and have us talk about the things that we want to see on the show in more organization. So people are kind of, again, the producers are kind of part of that creation process.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, and in doing this, I've done after-hours stuff not only for this show but for other shows, and like CES and Infocom last year. And the one thing that I found that was very useful was if I get to a booth where I don't know everything about this booth, there might be somebody that's kind of got the down low on what to look at and be able to kind of focus in that way for the regular show. But other than that, it's just way too hectic to try and plot out a game plan, especially when you're doing something for after hours rather than doing something that is going to be in the live production or anything like that, because then that way you can kind of plan with people in the booth and instead of just walking up and shining a camera in front of people's faces. So I think, it's you just have to do what you can do and then and get as much input from the people that are watching, and hopefully to make the live show even better.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Javier Alfaro in Mexico City, and Javier asks, is there going to be an edited version of the 5.1 feed? I really want to watch and listen to it.
Alex, is that
we're
possible?
probably not going to make it public, but we will have we'll cut some samples out of it, and we'll put it somewhere in Discord in the not too distant future.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Jack Rupel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Ambisonic mic and processing solutions are very expensive. Is there a way to use my own microphones and computer to achieve the same results?
Mickey, what do you think?
Yeah, you can sort of build a more affordable solution with a double MS system. I think Jeff Francis touched on MS microphone technique, mid-side microphone technique a week ago. A double MS is essentially would consist of 3 microphones, 2 cardioids, one facing forward, another facing back, and a figure 8 microphone to capture the sides. And you can, from those 3 microphones, you can derive a quad output, and that you could also, I guess, in a sense, combine the left and right output to create your center from that, or actually just take the cardioid mid microphone and send that out directly to the center channel. That's a more affordable solution to be able to capture some sort of a surround field with just 3 microphones.
Next question.
Next question is from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Much like NAB used to have more dedicated halls, might there be a day when Office Hours is simultaneously dedicated streams from a large show, audio, video, IP, AI, VO, FO? And finally, when should we, quote unquote, flip the trade show?
Alex, what's your thinking on this? I know you've articulated.
I mean, eventually, the goal is eventually, if we were big enough, we would have multiple channels. I think it'll take some time before we really need to do separate tracks for all of those. It could be years before we get big enough to do that, where we had, I'd rather, if I've got 4 days, I'd rather have a 3-hour section on audio and a 3-hour section on video and a 3-hour section on something else, so that what we want to avoid as much as we can is FOMO, fear of missing out, and having people, because we're so conversational based, it's not just coverage, it's people being able to be there and ask questions and be part of that conversation. So we'll try to keep a single path for as long as we possibly can. But when we start having we just can't get to it all. We're not there yet because we didn't broadcast from the time the show opened to the time it closed. And so because we didn't do that, we're still not at capacity, and we're still going to take us some time to get to that capacity, and then we can make it more efficient. Like one of the things we're talking about is you could have a live view with 4 Teradeks and the Rangers, and we could be jumping back in like popcorn in one venue and just jumping from one thing to the next. And that's the stuff we haven't started to even do yet. So I think that there's a lot for us to go before we start breaking up into those. As far as flipping the trade show, I think showing videos about all the things that are coming out before the trade show and then going to take a look at them, I think we should do that as soon as we can.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles. And Gordon asks, could the audio feed go out analog from the X32 rack to the ATEM switcher, or does it have to first go through the Dante device?
Mickey?
Yeah, it could be wired up directly from the X32 into the Constellation. This, similar to the question earlier, this pipeline has been in place prior to it's a legacy setup, I guess you could call it, when this X32 rack was in a completely separate rack. So we had wired it via Dante for ease.
Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas asks, wouldn't Dante MADI converter be a better way to send audio to and from the Constellation because it would have a DA-AD stage?
Mickey?
Yes, and I think this was similar to the question earlier. The DigiFace Dante was not around when this pipeline was first built out, and it would require coordination between someone to do tests and also someone to physically wire in the Constellation via MADI. Testing is very important. I'm not a fan of running audio into Blackmagic Design hardware, if you guys, and just in case you didn't know.
And we're at the top of the hour, but we're going to go a couple over because there's so many things to talk about here. And I know this was a big effort on everybody. So next question, Alex.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What other roaming crews at NAB caught your attention, and how did their approach differ from the OH roaming crews?
Alex?
Most of them were very more film-like and post-production. There was very little that was focused on live. I mean, that's the big thing we noticed the most was that, live is hard and most people don't have live views and all the live equipment and so on and so forth. So that was the biggest thing that you saw.
Big question next, Alex.
Next question is from George Whittam in Venice. And George asks, do you list credit somewhere showing all of the people and gear contributors that made this happen?
Alex?
I think it was in the end of the streams. We had some of those things, but I'm not sure.
There was a credit roll.
Yeah, there was a credit roll that I think had pretty much everything that we needed there. Yeah.
A lot of people put in a lot of hours under Brian's direction, and meetings. This was not a trivial thing in any respect. The human hours put into this would shock all of you if we'd actually taken a list of everything. Let's go on and get as many questions as we can before we have to sneak out.
Next question is from Greg Greckmeyer, and Greg asks, can you briefly discuss the use of LucidLink? I know we used proxy 720p files to help editors. Not sure how much that was useful or helpful.
Nobody weighed in on this. Alex, did you have any LucidLink? Did you hear any reports back?
LucidLink worked very well. I mean, LucidLink we've been using this for show after show, and we found it to be, just a really core piece of what we're doing. I think the challenge we had in this case was the bandwidth from the venue. So while LucidLink worked great, getting things up and the press, and we, that's probably an area that we're going to explore, is probably to have somewhere off-site that can, that has a lot of bandwidth that can get us out of the venue. So that's the next thing for us to challenge. So while LucidLink has proven to be very useful, and it's useful, and it worked well here, the problem we really had, and we didn't get as much out as we'd like, is because at the venue it was still pretty slow. And the problem is that we also realized we had Disaster Group. Keenan let us use his modem as well. The problem is the files we were generating were just massive, and so even with the wireless, it was hard for us to move files to do live streams. The Disaster Group would be perfect for that. It's really small, really easy to use. We were really happy with it, but to move these giant gigabit files we really needed a gig connection or a 500 meg connection, something like that, and we just didn't have that on this one. So we're working on making sure we have a solution for that in the future.
I want to give Brian just a second for the last word, because you were at the top of the pyramid of all the people who did this. Any last thank yous or comments you want to make before we move on?
Just looking forward to the next show. So stay tuned, and thank you to everyone, especially thanks to Alex, because it's having the ability and freedom to be able to do these things that brings everyone together. So thank you all.
And I just want to,
And I just want to
go
thank the whole team. You know, again, we're doing things and figuring things out together that you can't figure out by yourself. We can't figure out. The reason that we're starting to push this outer envelope and show this is because we have people all over the world thinking about these things, trying to figure it out, having some things succeed, some things fail, something somewhere in the middle. But we would never be able to figure this out on our own. And there's no one that's doing this. So at this level. So really just for everybody, there was over 50 people on the team total around the world. And we just want to thank everybody for taking part in it, because it's what makes it possible. And we're going to be doing it again soon.
Our thank you end of shows for everybody who is involved, particularly today. You saw how many people it takes. When we say it takes a village, you got a little insight into how many people it took us to do this kind of live show. Well, we do office hours every single day. So without our three-legged tripod of constituencies, that is the producers who are here. You're asking your questions and feeding them in. I'm sorry we couldn't get to each and every one, but there's so much technical information. I really enjoyed today, and I learned a lot, even though I was involved in the show directly. So I hope you did the same thing and felt that we covered as much as we possibly could. To the panelists who worked that show and who work this show every day, thank you for coming here. Without people answering questions, this would not happen. And the back-end crew, you are always magnificent each and every day, and you make all of this possible. Without them, nobody'd say anything. You have a black screen. That's unacceptable. After Hours takes off right now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
129,000 kilometers, 638 bananas per scale. I have to figure out why I'm not getting stereo through my mix pre. Something's not right. Oh, I think I know what it is. Anyway.
See you all tomorrow.